And welcome once again to Conversations with the Owl. We have Fritz the Nite Owl.
Greetings, good groovers, Earth people, 14 viewers out there in the darkness. Welcome to the Owls Megaplex Entertainment Center, Videodrome, and Megaplex. That was long, but I'm long-winded.
I'm in. I love malls. I love the 80s and malls, so I'm up for a Megaplex. We have Vidas Barzdukas.
Hello.
And we have... really? That's all we get from you?
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Published Author, sir. Writer of Nite Owl Theatre. And then we have our first guest on the show ever. This is exciting because this is the original. This is Eric Hartzell, who worked on the original show on Channel 10. So, Eric, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you did on the original Channel 10 show?
I am Eric Hartzell. I was an engineer, well, still am an engineer for Channel 10. How I've managed to do that, I don't know, but I guess that's because I just stay so low under the radar that they don't even notice me. But I was, I did camera, I did special effects, and mostly did audio for Nite Owl Theatre between 1981 and 1991.
Awesome, and that was the last 10 years of its run?
Yes.
And so, so really, for this episode, I'm so anxious to kind of jump into, I wasn't around, I was a little kid watching the show and everything when you guys were, using your playground there. And I know Fritz has mentioned before about when a new piece of equipment would come into Channel 10, they would kind of give it to Nite Owl to experiment with.
Mainly because Nite Owl Theatre was like the larger production value show that we had. Most of the other shows at that time, there was a lot of syndicated programs that we aired, but we did an awful lot of local programming as well. But most of those were very, very straightforward, just straight camera takes, guests come in, guests come out, great. Well, Fritz was on a completely different level because it was a completely production-oriented show, and with us recording all of the opens and closes, and then later on we had mid-breaks as well. But generally, in the beginning, it was just opens and closes, and then the Nite Owl slide would go up in between the breaks. They'd open the mic, Fritz's booth, he would comment, they'd move on to the commercial, back to the movie.
And Fritz, did you have like kind of a cue for when you were done talking? Because I know that not until the later days of the show did they give you like a time constraint, but like when you would just kind of go, would you just motion like when to go to commercial, like when you're done?
No, actually, they would tell me when the commercial was coming up, and I would be able to hear the music over my headset, and then I'd be able to work the commentary in with I would always pick music that had sort of high spots and low spots, so I could come in and say what I was going to say, and then the music would come up naturally, and then it would drop down and I would say more. And so between me and the music, of course I used to do that on radio all the time, and then I would bring in things that I knew were like that, and Eric would make sure that the balance was correct between me and the music, and it just worked out fine.
So it was almost like beat poetry in a way, right? Because you were just kind of
but I mean the thing is the beat poetry thing was real big when I was in the Army, 57 through 59, and I was stationed in outside of Manhattan, and the beat poetry thing was very, very big in the jazz clubs and so forth in New York at the time. And, of course, it was just a short subway ride from Astoria or Long Island City, where the Pictorial Center was, into Manhattan, where we could, it was marvelous. But we're getting off the track here. But the thing is, before I went to the Army, I worked 3 years from 54 to 57 before I went to the Army, but I wasn't on the air 54 to 57. And then, that is, I wasn't seen. I was just a voice. And then after, Nite Owl started around
74.
Well, 74. This is the 50th anniversary of this year we're celebrating.
Right.
Yeah. So.
It's just there's so much, and I did it so often. For example, like tonight, I had to have Eric tell me which announce booth I was working in and when. So his younger memory is a marvelous help. But
So-
they were terrific. Oh, I know what I started to say was that the Channel 10 engineering department, one of the owners had a thing for equipment, and they always had the latest and best
Yes.
equipment. And for example, like they bought a couple of things that they didn't need at all, except that they would, since they were on the, what it was they purchased, the effect was on there, although it wasn't used anywhere but my show. It was just terrific.
So Eric, did you know how to use before all this? Did you learn on the job when it came to the special
No, I
effects?
learned when I got there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had worked television at Otterbein and had done the radio there, but then when I came there, it was just like, okay, now let's learn 2-inch quad tape. You know, for those who remember 2-inch quad tape. I think one of the things that Fritz was talking about, one of the pieces of equipment that came into vogue at that time was a thing called an ADO. It was Ampex Digital Optics. It was made by Ampex Corporation, which no longer exists, but they were Ampex is Ampex, you know, the ones that started the first reel-to-reel machines, and it was allowed you to take an image and squeeze it down and fly it around and do all types of weird things. And it was incredibly expensive. I mean, this thing was probably somewhere between $2 to $3 million at that time.
Oh, wow.
Today, you'd look at what this thing does and go, it's nothing,
Sure.
you know. But back then, that was cutting edge in the early 80s.
But it replaced something that they had that I really liked, that the one you were talking about, we used to call the Squeeze Zoom.
Yes, Squeeze Zoom was actually from a company called Vital. They don't exist either, but it was called Vital made the switcher, and there was a thing called a Squeeze Zoom, and that was their version of it, but it was very archaic, and you could only do like little wipes going this way and that way, and it was
The one that replaced, there was one that would give a video echo that they got rid of, or I mean that they replaced with the Squeeze Zoom, I think was the last.
that was the Ampex Digital Optics system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had like terrific effects on
yeah,
there.
yeah.
That one that I always liked was that video echo type of thing.
Right. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So then how did it happen? Like, what was like when it came to the special effects, did you guys meet like in a conference room and then you'd
No.
toss out ideas?
He'd just come out and Fritz would say, hey, we want to do this. Some of the other technical directors at the time would kind of, their imagination would start to go wild, and you know they'd
would
do
come
some
up-
playing, you know, in between.
Yeah, they
because
would
we
come
had
up-
all of this.
They would come up with effects and show me.
Yeah.
And then I just figure out a time when we could use that it would tie into the movie. There were so many times, and the engineering department, Eric and the other guys, would find things that the equipment could do that were never ever used anywhere else.
Oh.
And then they would show it to me, and I'd say okay, and we would figure out a movie that it would go with, and then we would use it. So it was a collaborative thing, but I would come into the taping session, and then we would discuss what the special effect was what the visual effect was going to be right before we did it. And then we would do it and record it at the same time. And I was they had it set up so that I could see myself in the effect. I could see the finished product as we were doing it. And if there was something that I didn't like, I would either curse, so we'd have to do a take two, or I'd say, you know, can we do this again? But most of the stuff was one take, and the engineering was, and camera work and sound and everything was, everything just worked out all the time. The crew was beyond fabulous.
And they were able just to figure it out right then and there.
And we had to do it within like 2.5 to 3 hours maximum, because we would do this usually on a Sunday night after the 6 o'clock news and before the 11 o'clock news. So, yeah, it's like as soon as we were done, we'd roll down the giant chroma key curtain, and it was huge. I mean, it was probably 50 feet across, and we'd pull that thing all the way out into the studio so that it was almost like a seamless cyc of chroma key, and then Fritz could just sit in there, and we would just shoot him at the camera and do what needed to be done.
And were there other times where you would see something in a film or a television show and it would be like, hey, I want to recreate that? Okay. And just figure out how to put that into the film that you guys were doing.
I'm just picturing, like, what I love about you're picking the effect based on the material is you probably knew, like, if you're showing out of Africa, you're not going to do super trippy effects. So I kind of love that you're like, okay, we can, like, I can't wait to use this, but what did Haldy get? What packages did he? Okay, when are we showing this? Okay, the Running Man. Sure, we'll do something trippy with that. But,
I can remember that when we showed a picture like Out of Africa or some of the Tarzan or the Jungle pictures, I would use artwork as a background by Frazetta or Bern Hogarth, who was the guy who did the original Sunday he was the second guy to do the original Tarzan Sunday paper thing. But I would use a lot of art as a background for the movie I was going to do. A lot of times it was the poster from the movie we were showing, or artwork or a still photo. And I should mention, while the technical people will like this, our chroma key was on a light blue curtain, whereas most of the time when you see on national TV, they talk about doing chroma key, they're in front of a green screen. But for some reason, the one that we used that curtain, that light blue curtain, did a terrific chroma key. And it was the only time I've ever seen a light blue background for a chroma key.
I've seen people, I don't know if that was just the older way of doing it, but did they switch to green, you think, because it was less, it showed up less in clothing and things?
I think it's just because because technically blue is the furthest color away from human skin, at least, Caucasian.
Smurf.
Yeah.
No, nobody? All right.
Because you can do chroma key in any color. It's just whatever. And green has just kind of become the standard of the industry. So, yes.
Well, and that is a shade of green that that's like a lime green.
Yeah. I mean, they actually have paint, and you get it, and it says right on it, chroma key green. And
okay.
It's
its own color.
Well, all I can say is that the blue curtain gave us a chroma key effect for, like, the flying sequences and whatever we were going to do. It just gave a perfect illustration of whatever it was I was doing in front of it. There was never, ever a little black line around the figure or anything else fading out. It was terrific. It was perfect.
Well, I remember seeing you, and this is long before Harry Potter, folks, but I remember seeing you, like, wrap it around you in one of those things.
Oh, yeah.
And you would just become a head.
Yes.
I mean, like, that easy. Like, just...
Yep.
And there you go.
I use that effect a lot.
That little chroma key blanket he had was used for just about everything. We would, like, if he was, like, swimming through water, we actually had a piano chair, and we just put that over it, and then Fritz would lay down on it, and he was swimming.
We did that for the new version of Nite Owl. We had a piano bench, and I think we did it one episode, and he was just like, this is not as comfortable as it was in the 70s.
Well, it was 10 or 15 years later.
Right.
I was going to ask something, but my mind wandered.
Chroma key, blanket.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, now, the last switching effect that we had, in the old days, I would have to lay on the piano bench in order to do a thing like swimming or flying. But the last one I could be standing up, and electronically they could flip me and put me, so I could do I could have done the dancing on the walls if I had been, up the wall, across the ceiling, and down. The equipment was capable of doing that. It's just that I couldn't dance. However, we did do a lot of things where they would move me upside down or perpendicular to a wall or something like that, which at the time nobody else was doing. And that was one of the things that the effects were one of the things I think that set the show apart from any other hosted movie on the planet.
Well, yeah, like how many other stations across the U.S. do you think were even messing with this stuff? I mean, Channel 10 had the budget that most of these stations didn't. So, I mean...
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but what I'm interested is in the process of this whole thing. So if at 6:30 you showed up, you lowered the curtain, you had everything ready, and I'm sure, since you mentioned it was a collaborative effort, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of had ideas that they would come up with, correct? And then anybody was able to pitch the idea of what they wanted to do. So it didn't have to be you, Eric, or Fritz. Anybody could pitch something.
But they knew going in what we were going to have to do.
Yeah,
meaning what?
I would
what
come.
Whatever he had planned for that recording session, we already knew going in, because he talked to us during the week, and we said, "Oh, we're going to do this week." And, okay.
Meaning the film. Which film you're going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or which effects?
Did you do more than one? Did you record more than one film in a night?
We would do a whole week's worth in one night.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And sometimes two, depending, and those would be like simple ones. Sometimes we'd do actually 2 full weeks worth in an evening, but the effects were just chroma key them in front of a picture and we're done. And we'd have that same picture
and a lot
for
of times,
one whole week, and then another picture for another whole week.
And that was actually why we had the tower there. The tower was kind of a home base for when we didn't have an effect.
Right.
And yet guys like Eric and some of the other engineers would figure out a way to enhance the tower. Like they would have the Catalina flying behind it.
Oh, I always loved
have
those,
some way
the
that
night
they
sky
could
and-
spotlight me on the tower. But I mean, all I knew was, okay, we'll just do it in front. We'll just do it. I'll be on the tower, and then they would say, well, we can fly the airplane behind you, or we can show the cityscape of Columbus. And so that's why I say it was collaborative. I would say, okay, I'm just going to be on the tower, and then they would say, well, hey, what if we flew the Catalina in, or we had a lady do a belly dance up there? And
About that.
No,
Funny.
but I mean,
we,
that was what it was.
Yeah.
And it was a thing that it didn't take away from the effect. It added to it, but it didn't take any extra time.
Yeah.
So that we could do it fast.
One thing I loved, you mentioned the belly dance, so I'm restoring all the footage from that you had saved over the years for an eventual set that we're bringing out. And you had saved, I noticed when you did an effect, you were like, I'll save the intro and the outro, and then like if you did it more that week, you're like, I don't need all of them, just a couple of them here. The week that woman came on and belly danced, I think every damn intro, mid-break, and outro all week is on that.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, Fritz wanted every
there
damn
were
one.
there were a few times that we would come up with an effect that had no relation to the movie, but it was just so spectacular.
Yeah.
We would use it. And the belly dancer had nothing to do with any of the movies we were showing that week, except that A, she was available for that night, and B, we figured out a way to...
And the ratings went through the roof.
Okay, I'm
to
sorry.
do it.
I don't know the belly dancer. So what's the...
There's an effect where Fritz is just strictly narrating, but what's great about it is he's like, she's interpretive dancing.
Right
and he
next
literally
to-
is like, no, not next to him or anything. He's not even on screen. It's just this woman
Voiceover.
that has ghost trails. And as she's belly dancing, you can see like ghost trails, like the effect. And then he's just like, she's telling me we're about to watch The French Connection or something like that.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
so great because it's just anyone who is just at home just
It's
enhanced
mesmerizing. It's
is
mesmerizing.
probably
sure.
just could watch that.
Well,
for
there was a thing that I forget which engineer thought of it, where they took a studio monitor and tipped it forward or sideways, and then they would shoot the camera
Got the infinity effect
into the lens.
Yes, that would have been Denny Adams.
Yeah.
He was a technical director who later became he was like the assistant to the production director, and then he finally retired about 20 years ago. But yes, I remember when he did that.
And the thing is, the way they would move the camera or the monitor would change the effect. There would be like explosive colors. It was really a psychedelic thing. And I don't know how he discovered it, but once he showed it to me, it was a thing that they were so terrific. There would be nights when I would use that as the background for what I was doing on camera. And again, it was just a thing that the engineers just would come up with stuff and they would show me. 90% of the time, what I did was directly related to the movie we were showing. But there were times when the guys would come up with something spectacular that I would just use because it looked so good.
Sure.
And then figure out a way to tie it in with the movie, like the belly dancer talking about her moves as this part
She
of
was
the
on all week.
Yeah, this part of the movie. Her movement now shows the car chase that's coming up in the second reel. Blah blah blah. So it was very much a collaborative effort.
So then you guys, and then you would do an entire week in one night.
Yes.
And then how long would you? I mean, would you sit there and go, "Okay, guys, we have 15 minutes per segment," or like
just do it till it's done.
because a lot of fans are really interested in this stuff, and so I'm thinking like, what would they want to know? You know, about the behind the scenes stuff that, you know, where you guys kind of like, we just did it and we just did it, you know, we just made it happen. And I'm sure that there's a lot of details. Like, did you guys have a favorite one? Did you guys have one that was like, you know, the fans loved it, but it was so hard to pull off? Or is there one that, you know, you guys argued over? Or is there, like, did you guys have ones that you went back to because they were your favorites? You know, I'm just curious about.
I think it was just ongoing. I mean, we would do an effect and we would just move on and do something else.
Okay.
Well, because it was every night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the cool things. Is, excuse me.
In
but
terms
the fact
of,
that you have all this time.
in terms of, say, the flying effect, it started out I would have to lay on the piano bench, which was covered by the chroma key cloth, and the way they would have me move is the camera actually had to move, and that would move me across the screen. But when we got like the squeeze zoom, I could just stand there and they would tip me up in the swimming position or flying position, and the cameraman didn't have to do anything. And so we were able to fly electronically, plus the fact that they could make me larger or smaller without changing the camera positioning. The squeeze zoom would make me bigger or smaller to keep me in frame, and yet they could move the background behind me to make it look like there was movement.
Yeah, I noticed, especially early on, you did some really hard stuff, and it might have been, Eric, before you were there, but I remember you did like a shrinking head thing, like way before Beetlejuice. You did like this shrinking head thing, but you would have had to pre-tape your body first, and then the shrinking head was a separate layer. So you were still moving your hands and talking, but it was a different take. I mean, it really was a lot of work for one night live.
Well, actually,
which is kind of amazing, you know.
We did that in about one or two takes. It didn't take extra long. I remember the movie was about a psychiatrist, and I went on a rant about how it was insulting to refer to a psychiatrist as a shrink. And as I'm talking about how there are no such things as head shrinkers, blah blah blah, they're shrinking my head on top of the body there. Now, was that a squeeze zoom effect, or?
It depends on when that was. I don't remember that particular.
That
one.
was when you were just on the tower set before
the original
tower set.
So that would have been pre-1982, because that was when we moved to the new tower set when the new tower was finished.
Yeah, that was. Now, was there ever a night? Because I know, like, being a songwriter, sometimes I'll go into the studio to record a song, and then I'll like on break come up with like a riff and be like, "Oh, let's cancel everything. We're recording this song." Did you ever do that with an effect where like you got to work, planned on doing this, and you saw something like maybe they were messing with it, and all of a sudden you guys all were like, and like we're doing this tonight. Did you ever like swap it out or?
Yeah.
You know, that's awesome.
It was very spontaneous. A lot of the things we did were created as a group right at the time, and
well, and you never thought people would see this again, because I mean there weren't even VCRs until what, 83, 82 or something, where like people could even tape this. So like if you went live, sometimes you would do the same effect like throughout the week, right, to make sure like everyone gets a chance to see it. Otherwise it's just, well, we did that Monday, it was awesome, and if you missed it, you missed it, because it was live.
If I reused an effect all through the week, it was because we all liked it so much, and we would do it. Most of the time, the effect and the visual related in some way directly to the movie we were showing that night. Like, I forget the name of the movie, but it dealt with psychiatry, and that's why we did the shrinking head bit.
Yeah.
So the two were exactly related. But there would be nights when, not a lot of them, where I would come in with one idea, and then they would show me something that was even better. And so we would, right at the moment, we would do it right then.
So then how many engineers, how many people worked on this? Were there...
You mean at one time? Or
yeah, like how many people were, like how many people were in the room when you're...
let's see. 1,
Two
2,
cameramen.
3, 4, 5, about 6 to 7 people.
So when it came to the ideas and the effects, did people have different skill sets? Like one
Yes.
guy was really good, like, so
Oh, yeah.
can you say more about that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you'd have people that all they did was camera.
Okay.
And you'd have other people, all they did was be a technical director. Other people that would be just audio.
okay, sure.
And then you'd have the obviously the tape room where everything was recorded, and you didn't have to have skill set for that.
Right.
The only people that were really involved in it would be obviously the camera operators, the technical director, and the audio person. They were the main people putting it together, and everything else was just ancillary.
Well, also floor
because the
director.
audio had to go with what's that?
The floor director and the production assistants were always also directly involved with it, because they would have to physically set up what it was we wanted to do, whether it was using just a still photograph as a background or a certain way of furniture or whatever. Anyway, there was a production crew. What did we have? We had one floor director and
We had one floor director and one Chiron operator.
Right.
That was it.
And wasn't there a production assistant that helped the floor director set up the
Yes, because at that time they actually ran teleprompter. It
Oh,
was,
yeah.
It was
Well,
physical.
I never used that.
It was physical paper, and so there was a person that actually sat there and laid the scripts out on a little black and white camera, rolling on a treadmill, and that was how they read teleprompter. Obviously today it's all digital, but back then, there would have been a third person.
Well, today is all digital.
Yeah, today's all digital.
Yeah, when we shoot our new episodes, he still writes cards, and we hang them from like a C stand, and that's why Fritz is like no more than 6 cards a break. So we always knew we can get this far, and we
Well, that was because all of that was
wouldn't
all
fit.
of the space we had to hang the pictures on,
Yep.
or to hang the cue cards or the idiot cards on.
Yeah.
But I ad-libbed most of the stuff that we did, and the cards were there to remind me of things I wanted to say or a certain way to say something I wanted to say. So it was a combination of the cards that I would do by hand and ad-lib as we went through the thing. I don't think at Channel 10 I ever used the teleprompter for anything.
No, you would just wing it.
That's how we would do. Like I know, I never saw you look at your cards. Like when we were shooting, you'd always just sort of like they're there, and you would maybe glance over, but it was always just. I don't know if you just trigger yourself like,
well,
I know what
I think it was you couldn't see my eyes through the glasses.
Right. Yeah.
But no, I use them a lot because there were things I wanted to be sure that I said, and because of my not so great memory, they would be on the cards. That was one of the reasons that I was not good in theater, live theater, is A, I had trouble memorizing, and B, I had trouble doing the volume that would get my voice to, say, like the upper balcony at the Ohio Theater. I mean, I'd have to shout, which would just eliminate any kind of emotion that was in the dialogue. Now, for example, like when I was doing Nite Owl, I would tell Eric if there was something I wanted to do louder or softer, blah blah blah, or off, and I mean he would just come up and do it without at the thing. So it was kind of an interplay there.
Well, I imagine the audio guys, looking at the effect and then knowing like, okay, if you're trailing off, zooming out in the background, they would add the reverb to the audio. I mean, because it was all done, even though you had taped it, it was all taped live, right? So they had to do it while it was happening. So, no post effect.
Yeah, how much post was there for?
None. It was all done live to tape, and that was it. And if there was mistakes or something made, sometimes they would just run out of time, and they would just, I was like, well, that's it. We don't have time to go back and do it.
So there's like no color correction, no nothing like that.
No, that's amazing.
No. But yes, the audio would almost always have something to do with whatever the effect was or the mood. It all depended.
But see, Eric wouldn't know what it was I wanted to do until it came. We might have done 2 or 3 nights worth of movies, and we'd come up to movie number 4, and I would go to Eric and I'd say, can you give me can you do this, or will you do this, and so forth. So he would find out what was needed 3 minutes before we did it. And as I say, the crew was so terrific that most of the things we did, we were able to do that many tracks in one night simply because everybody that was working on it was so good.
Well, the only time you ever said no to me was wearing a Santa hat. Were there ever times that, Eric, you had to say no to Fritz when he wanted a certain effect because it was like too outlandish or you didn't quite?
Only if we ran out of time and we just couldn't make it work the way we wanted to. And then Fritz would just say, well, okay, let's just do this.
Yeah, just be on the tower, grind them out and wrap up so they could do the 11 o'clock news.
Everybody was because it was so much fun to do, it was the outlet, because when we weren't doing Fritz, it was news.
Yeah.
So you're just cranking out the sausage,
Yep.
6 o'clock, 11 o'clock, morning news. Well, here we go again. But then, then we get to do Fritz. So people would just go out of their way because it was just to allow their
creativity
to just flow out. And that was why when I came on and started doing the audio, and then I got with my counterpart Randy Nice. He was the technical director, and I would come up with a lot of the like the spaceship effects and things like that. Some of that stuff I had shot, and then I took it to him and said, "Hey, let's do this." And he would, during downtime, he would come up with all the star fields and things.
Yeah, but the thing is, you were the one that made the rocket ship models.
Yes.
That were used visually on the thing. For example, I forget which one we had a Star Trek type interior.
Yes, that was me.
Yeah, no, I know you did it, but what I was saying
was it the white room with the screen?
It was that elaborate.
Yeah,
and like he put in a place where I'm sitting in the Captain Kirk chair, and there are television screens behind me.
Yep.
And there's pictures moving in those screens.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And yet the model he built was maybe 18 inches wide and maybe 6, 7, 8 inches high, and they were able to key me in there. And you did also the exterior spaceship,
Yes.
as I recall.
The one sitting in the Channel 10 parking lot?
Yes.
The Millennium Owl?
The Millennium Owl.
Right. Well, plus we used it for where the ship was taking. It was in moving forward when I would do the open, and then when I would do the close, we'd go from the interior where I would do my closing verbal thing, and then the rocket, the flying thing would go off backwards into the distance.
Yeah, we use a lot of that footage in the new trailer we made for the new, just showing like the past and the present. It starts with you walking out the Channel 10 doors and going to the Millennium Owl.
But one of the things is I would say in most cities in those days, every station had their own variety show, their own cast of characters, like George Clooney's dad did a show over on Channel 4 for about 2 years. But every station had its own special programs, which are non-existent in television anywhere anymore.
Yeah, it's
well, I was
insane,
going to say now, for example, I think Eric Flippo would bring in a live musical group many times. And so Eric would have to do Eric or the sound man on duty would have to mic the instruments so that the music came out right along with Flippo's.
That had to be rough because, these talk shows, they have literal crew that does just that for the band. That's a whole monster.
In those
right
days
there.
at Channel 10, Eric had to do it. As a matter of fact, we even had the Ohio State Marching Band on a couple of times, and then we had local bands that Flippo would bring in. Flippo had a Saturday morning show. That was when I was working just production. This was before I went to the Army. But he had the Saturday show, and he would always he was a terrific saxophone player, and he would bring in a group about 3 or 4 other people, and the music just sounded great.
That's awesome. Now, when you produced, did you work on the music videos for the band Money? Do you remember this?
No, that was at the studio that used to be the old Channel 6.
Oh, so that wasn't in Channel 10.
That wasn't at
okay.
Channel
Gotcha.
10,
Okay,
no.
I thought they used the Nite Owl set for that or something. And
No, that was
good band.
So were there a lot of people clamoring to work on the show? When you were?
No, it was whoever was assigned that day, because the schedules would come out and be like, because some weeks people would be on vacation and it's like, okay, you're not running audio this week, you're working the tape room. I go, okay. So someone else would fill in for it, and I'd sit there, kind of gritting my teeth because it's like, all right, fine.
So there are people that were just kind of like temps, not temps, but people who were not normally working on Fritz. They would come on and
they would do the best they could.
Gotcha. Okay.
But most of the time, those were very
is it rare when it
rare
happened?
times.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've got to say, everybody on the engineering staff could do just about any job that needed to be done. I can't think of. Everybody could do camera. Everybody could do the taping. Well, I guess the switcher was
a little bit more
technical.
So there was only a smaller
group of guys
to choose from, yeah.
But most of the production stuff on Nite Owl, anyone on the staff
could have come in and done.
Yep. Not as well as the people that did it regularly, but the Channel 10 engineering staff was, A+.
Yeah.
On not only were they good there, they were fun to work with.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think everybody would be like, I want to work the Fritz show.
No, yeah, sure.
just to break away from the day-to-day.
So then
they were at the mercy of the person that scheduled the engineers. Although, as I say, most of the people that worked on my show were regularly assigned that night shift.
Did anyone else from staff that wasn't scheduled to work your show maybe in the beginning or something, did anyone just kind of hang out for fun just to see it happening because it was such a trippy? I mean, you guys were doing things that you don't see on the news. So I mean, were other coworkers just kind of visiting to just see it happen when it first got started, or
Mostly the news people.
oh, okay,
Oh,
yeah,
really?
of
News
course.
people would come out and do that, and of course the weather meteorologist would pick one. They were in the studio because that's where their office was, so they'd kind of stop and they'd sit and watch and see what was going on, and then they have to go back and get ready for the 11 o'clock news that night.
Now, did you guys ever make any cameos in any of the?
Yes.
Okay.
Some of the crew that you will see, and I think the one that I always think of the most were my spaceship ones, where he needed to have a pilot. Fritz was sitting in the co-pilot seat. The pilot was generally one of the production folks. So
they just would be like, "Hey, Bob, get in there." You're
yeah,
the
they
pilot.
just say,
Okay.
"Hey, go in there," and they sit there. Okay, so they're flying the ship.
Right.
And you'd see them like pushing buttons and stuff, and yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Well, it was the thing that before I went to the Army, 54 through 57, I worked as a production assistant, and the late night movie host was a very talented guy named Don Riggs. And a lot of times he would be doing some kind of sketch where he needed a spare carrier or extras in there, and the floor crew, the production crew, would be the guys that we would stand around or be background for whatever
Right.
it was Riggs wanted to do.
Okay.
But I mean,
kind of like what Tim Conway did when he was working with Ghilardi up in Cleveland at WJW.
Okay.
He was the camera operator, and he'd lock the camera down, and he'd go out in front of the camera and do stuff with Ghilardi.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
awesome.
okay.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah,
And
Vidas is from Cleveland.
I'm from
Okay.
Cleveland,
Yeah. And then later they said you'll never amount to anything. You're not funny, and all this.
To Tim Conway?
Tim
Tim
Conway.
Conway, yeah.
Yeah, whatever happened to that guy?
Did he get his start on Carol Burnett, or was it like when he broke out,
His-
or was he already big before?
No,
Carol
his
Burnett?
breakout was McHale's Navy.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. 'Cause some of his stuff.
He
I was
basically
watching-
went right from WJW doing camera in the production department there to out to Hollywood, where he did some little things, and then boom, he was right on McHale's Navy there in the early '60s, and it just took off from there.
Wow, because he was great on Carol Burnett. Like some of those skits are hard not to watch. You watch him break up. I mean, he never broke. Everyone around him broke. So yeah, it was pretty great.
And then after taping, did you usually go home to watch the episodes? And
We would watch them, yeah.
Yeah.
We would always watch them. I mean, we were kind of critiquing ourselves. We'd see just how when we watch it in the studio, it looks perfect, but it's like, okay, what's it look like at home on a normal TV? What's it sound like? And most of the time, it was
Well,
exactly what we thought, and
We were a week
we were very
ahead.
pleased.
Yeah.
We were a week ahead. We would record it on one Saturday, and then they wouldn't show that until a week
We
later.
were always a week out. Yes.
We were a
So
week
you wouldn't
ahead.
see what you did that day for a whole week.
Yeah.
Like,
Right, but we would see it on the monitors while we were doing
Right.
it. Unlike, say, Nite Owl now, I never see the finished product with the special effect until the people in the theater see it. I do it in front of the green screen, but I don't know what the finished effect is going to look like until I see it with the audience in the theater.
So yeah, so if you had to do it again, Eric, like with technology today, would you still do the live stuff? Would you do the green screen, like how
Oh yeah, we'd still do it that way.
the
I
old
mean,
one?
obviously, the technology today, that you guys have used is exactly the way we would have done it. It was just at that time,
Sure.
we had more of a constraint because we had other duties that we had to look forward to. It's like, okay, you're scheduled between this time and this time, get it done, because we won't have time to go back and redo it. So
But there is a creativity that if you're in a box, you have to be as creative as you have to be as you
Yes.
can
Yes.
with the parameters that you have, with the constrictions that you have. And that's what's kind of fun about it, is that when you look at it, you're like, oh, you could only do, say, 5 things, but you were super creative with what you were able to do with the technology and the tools that you had. So that's pretty.
Yeah, that's one thing we always said about the new version is I wanted to approach it as if had the show never left the airwaves, where would it be now? And then that way it was just like, okay, now and when we started the episodes of the bigger movies that were uncut, we were like, okay, well, they're not censored, but it'd be like Fritz moved to HBO as opposed to,
Right.
So it was just a really It's so awesome, like how long this show. I mean, 50 years now. To the fact that
plus
still
the fact that the engineers and the crew would do stuff while you were on the air because it was kind of a game to see if you could break up the person on the thing. Now, for example, we had a weatherman named Bob McMaster who, in those days, there was no chroma key weather. He had a map and a flow pen and would actually do the stuff in Joe Holbrook. Also, they would do it on the map was there, and they would use the flow pen to go on the plexiglass to show the thing. But Bob McMaster used to like to move the marker in such a way that it would make that sound of like chalk on a blackboard, and everybody's spine would just chill up. And Bob thought that was just terrific. And it was more because a lot of us hung out together and did things at the station together that were not just hanging out like in the recreation area or something, or getting together to watch another show being done. Because Flippo always had people watching him, because not only was he visually funny, he had the knack of doing dialogue that would appeal to an 8-year-old, and yet somebody who's 25 got a second meaning out of it that you would laugh. So
well, it's almost like with the, when The Simpsons premiered, it was like great for your parents, also great for kids, but the kids wouldn't understand the innuendos or any of the things that were happening, and then the parents, and that's why it worked for going on 40 years now. But now, as far as coworkers go, I've worked with a lot of people in the spotlight, and different people will have different size egos, but every one of them, usually if they're on every night, cameras on them, there's some form of like, oh, do I look all right? Do I have my hair perfect? And I wonder how many newscasters visited the set of Nite Owl when you were doing it. Was like, damn it, I want flying stars behind me in the spaceship, and just thought like, what's this guy got? That always cracks me up to think about is just that's pretty neat. Why don't we have that?
That never happened. But it was like at Channel 10, Eric and the other engineers had to be able to do the news, weather, sports. Then they would have to do a variety show like we had. I forget who it was at noon, but she was a nationally known lady, and they would do like a noon variety show, and then in the afternoon they would have Aunt Fran. Well, no, Aunt Fran was in the morning, and Lucy's Toy Shop was in the morning. So the engineers had to be able to cover all of those unusual shows by them. Like, for example, on Lucy's Toy Shop, a lot of the characters were in masks, and so the audio guy had a tougher time. Okay, how do we get them? And of course, there were you there when they didn't have the clip-on mics? It was just the boom mic.
No.
Yeah,
that was before I got there.
Yeah, that was in the before I went to the Army. They did bring in the clip-on mics before 57, but I think for 54 and 55, and maybe in 56, the only mics they had were on the booms, and a guy had to get on a platform, and the boom would go out over this long
is that how
tube.
Nite Owl was, or did you have a mic on you?
He always had just a standard lavalier microphone.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the lavalier replaced the boom 98% of the time.
Yeah,
because with us for the 2010 version, we always had a boom, because it was just like to get you wherever you would go or whatever. But we never. I think in the beginning we might have had a mic, but yeah, we ended up going to boom.
Now, Eric,
that's more of a Hollywood way to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, lavalier microphones don't really exist in Hollywood as far as the pickup.
Yeah.
Everything is on a shotgun microphone.
No,
Which is crazy how they can get some of the distances where they're not in the shot, and like it's insane riding those levels how they can.
Well, it was a thing that I think when we were doing Nite Owl, there was a boom in the studio, but it was never used.
It was from years past.
From years past, yeah. But nobody used it. And also they had a piano in there.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was a Steinway.
Did you ever have anyone like live play while you were?
Oh, yeah. On
awesome.
Flippo's show. See, Flippo was a musician and a magician. And he could do a lot of personal appearances where he would go just as Bob Marvin in Civvies as a saxophone player, and he had his own group. And then on the Flippo show, a lot of times he'd bring in the group that he went on personal appearances with.
Oh, that's cool.
When I was working production assistant, we always loved. We really worked to get on the Monday schedule afternoon during the Flippo show because he would have gone to one of these musicians' picnics on Sunday, or he'd been to the magic shop on Saturday, and on Mondays he'd always either come in with a bunch of new jokes that you couldn't tell on the air or a couple of new close-up magic tricks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very, very talented guy. Actually, he started off as the singer on the afternoon afternoon variety show, because they didn't have news at noon back in those days. They had, I forget the lady's name, but anyway, every station had a local noon variety show that was specialized in visitors from out of town or specially talented people or guests of some kind.
Yeah.
And then the host and his on-camera crew would do stuff, and yet our engineering department had to be able to cover that, and Aunt Fran and Flippo and Nite Owl and the news and the weather, and new equipment was coming in all the time. So these guys were just aces in. I never heard one of our engineers say we can't do that.
Oh wow, okay.
Or I don't want to do that.
So is there a sense of camaraderie like with the group, like with
there was, yes. Yeah, because you would have different directors that would go through it. I mean, there was probably a dozen different directors that directed Nite Owl Theatre over the years.
So what does that mean, though? If you guys are all collaborating on this, what role does the director have?
He just basically, if we had a special effect and the technical director was setting it up, the audio person was setting up, we would tell the director so that they knew what was coming, then they would plan for it, and then it was just he was kind of like a traffic cop for all intents and purposes.
Okay. And then they would be the ones just yelling action and,
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's wrong?
My cover's blown. I didn't really do much on the show.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. No,
Because you were talking about it was such a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what everybody's role was. Like before when I asked, like, was somebody, you talked about, was the squeeze effect or the squeeze camera?
Squeeze zoom.
Squeeze zoom.
Squeeze zoom. Okay.
Squeeze zoom.
Like, I don't know if there was like, that was you were really good at that while Bob over here was good at something else. And, that's what I meant by that.
Yeah,
so
no, I'm just giving
role.
you shit. No, I mean, I will say, like, what I saw as directing in the new version that we did is just timing with the effect. Like, where if I wanted Fritz to, hey, when you say this word, make sure to step this way on that sentence, and then because we're going to have this come in. And that's what I saw as directing, is just basically making things easier on our effects guy.
No, I hear that. But
we're just like for the post stuff.
Yeah, but I was curious, with these guys, like how much of it was, Eric telling Fritz, or Fritz was going on this line, I'm going to move over here, and then Eric and his crew would have to adapt to whatever was going to happen. And
it's almost like Fritz was the captain, and then everybody was just made the captain's vision come to life.
But every once in a while, I would have to say, "Okay, Captain, we have to do it this way."
Right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing, is the you had to hold. Did you still have to hold? You had to hold still a lot and everything back then, right? Too, because I know on some of the effects we've done, the harder ones are where we can't. We're like,
when it was just the head,
Yeah.
that we would superimpose over somebody else or something else. Because it could be a person, it could be anything else. We had one where it was an owl, and we actually took his face and put it over an actual owl's face, and all you saw was a little bit of the glasses and the mouth right where the beak was, and it was actually kind of scary. Because he would smile at the end. So,
Did you ever work the Don Mack show?
no.
Oh, now Don Mack was an animal show, and I mean he would bring in snakes and bears and birds and everything. I think I think he was something with the Columbus Zoo before Jack Hanna. But actually, Jack Hanna used to have a show on Channel 10.
Yeah, we had Hannah's Ark that ran for 4
Hannah's
seasons.
Ark, yeah.
Yeah, I think some of those were on the drive.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome. Were you allowed to smoke and drink on? I mean, I know you didn't, but what my point is, in those days, because it was such a creative show, were you allowed to bring things to work if it didn't get out of hand?
I can remember there were sections of the station when I first got there that became no smoking areas, where just a few months earlier had been smoking areas, like out in the studio. Yeah. But they started pushing that back, and it's like you have to smoke out in the hallway. You can smoke in your office, but you can't smoke in the studio. You can't smoke in the control room. And I know that
in the original studio where we had the first tower and I was first doing it, anybody used to be able to smoke, the engineers, while they were doing the stuff, as long as the smoke didn't get in the way of the screen, unless you were the talent and you were sitting there. Because remember, Chet Long used to have that thing of pipes on his desk, and sometimes the camera would come on the Chet Long show, and Chet would be sitting there puffing on his pipe and taking and actually Chet was the #1 newscaster in Columbus for years. But I mean, it was not unusual for Chet to be smoking his pipe when
different era.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I watched movie, and I watched Anchorman. It's just kind of, everybody was like slapping each other on the butt and smoking, and all. I'm like, obviously it's a parody, but I'm like, how much of that, smoking and drinking at work? Everyone said the boss in the office always had a bottle of whiskey or something, where it's just
some of them did. They just didn't talk about it.
Well, right.
Yeah.
And then the last question,
but they never did it on. They never did it on the air.
Right. Well, yeah. I just mean if you're on a show that creative, it seems like it would be kind of, I think back to every time we shot Nite Owl, the new version, I never had a drink, and usually I'm like, if we're being that creative, I like to get a little buzz and just, but no, we never. It's like too focused. But
no, I mean, it was like when we would do our taping.
Yeah.
Well, I think just about everybody drank socially.
Right.
But I mean, nobody was drinking or smoking in the studio.
Right. Yeah.
Just coffee.
Yeah.
Right.
You always had a coffee cup. Always had a coffee cup.
Yeah.
Well, the last question I always wondered, since you're both here, is in that time, your work was your playground, and you get to create all these things. Did you come home to your families, and were they just like yawn, or was it like, oh, that's nice, or were they like, holy crap, you guys, this is awesome, or like, if they watch it, did they get a kick out of it, or was it just like, that's your work?
If they were, because remember, Nite Owl didn't come on till 11:30,
right?
And then they got the Pat Sajak show in there, which ran an hour and a half after the news. So it was 11:30. It was like 1 o'clock before. So it was a question of if they were awake and they saw it.
Yeah.
They usually liked it.
Nice.
Oh, offhand, there was a show called The Judge. And my wife was on it a couple of times, and they usually had her playing a hooker or a teenage girl who was in trouble. And when my wife would go to like the PTA meetings and some of the women's clubs she belonged to, those people actually believed that was the way she was.
Right.
And so there was there was that thing of you did carry the show off camera with you in some ways.
So
That's awesome.
So what about you, Eric? Did your family, were they like, wow, that's really sweet that?
Oh yeah, my friends and I didn't have any family here,
Right,
but
okay.
but friends and girlfriends and stuff. I remember sitting there one day and it's like, oh look, there's my name going up on the screen. Okay,
That's really cool.
Well, we had some friends at WOSU engineering department that many times they would call one of us and say, how did you do what you did on Wednesday night?
Sure.
And apparently they would watch the show to see how technically we would do things.
So
That's when you just look at them and you go, magic.
Right. Well, it was basically like you would get the tools, you would figure out ways to do it that were, beyond what normal people, what people were doing with it, and then
Right.
other people would be like, "Hey, I can't figure out how you did that."
Right.
And you guys were just doing this on the fly.
Like the fish tank effect.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the ones I know from OSU. They would call it. They go, how did you?
What
do
is
that?
what was that?
There's one where Fritz's. In fact, if I remember correctly, the movie was The Boy and the Dolphin
Okay.
Yeah.
with Sophia Loren.
Sophia Loren,
Yeah.
right.
And so we had Fritz just swimming through a fish tank. He was in the water, and it was great. Okay, he's in the water. But then they started noticing, wait a minute, the fish are swimming in front of him and behind him. And we just shot it, chroma keyed it, layered it, and that's how we were able to do it.
And then they called you and said, "How did you?"
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I would
Well,
just tell
because
them
if
layers.
Fritz is in front of the fish, it's
Well-
one thing.
Oh no, I understand.
Wait,
But
wait,
for fish to go in front is like,
It's
how the
different.
hell?
Yeah, sure.
Come to think of it now, talking about the crew input, when I came in, I just told him, I said, okay, we've got this fish tank here with fish. I want to be on the piano bench swimming. And it was one of the engineers who said, well, look, we can have the fish behind you and in front of you. And I didn't think that was possible when I was thinking of the effect for that movie. But when I came in and I said, okay, here's the fish tank and here's what we're going to do, one of the guys just said, hey, well, wait, we can do it.
Is that you,
was
Eric?
Eric.
That was me, yeah.
Who just said, we can put the fish in front of you. And
Well, okay, so how did you do that? Because nowadays, if we did it, we would rotoscope it, and we would frame by frame make that
No,
fish.
this was actually, I had a fish tank and a chroma keyed behind it.
Yeah.
Nothing else in it. Put the fish in it. Recorded that part. Then we would end up having the fish tank with the background behind it and the plants, and then Fritz would be keyed over that, but then we'd have the other. We were doing like a double chroma key, so you would have Fritz keyed over live, and then you'd have the recorded segment of the other fish and plants on a completely separate
no, but
tape.
that
And
was
so
one,
that's how we just layered them together.
And you just came up with that day.
Yeah, we just
We
came up with it that day. In fact, the fish came, believe it or not, from a secretary's upstairs. Had one of these little fish tanks, and I had a big 5-gallon tank, and I brought it in and filled it up and put the dechlorinator in it. Went upstairs and I borrowed the fish for the week for that night, and we shot this like a couple of hours, and we were done.
Oh wow.
but the thing is, an effect that, I should say, elaborate and engineeringly really, really creative and so forth. I mean, that was created by Eric in 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
As
Yeah.
soon as I said, I'm going to be swimming in front of these fish, he said, well, wait, I got an idea how we can have fish in front of you and fish behind you.
Do you-
And we did it, with no rehearsal. It was like one, I think it was a 1 or 2 take thing. And so that would happen a lot.
do you remember any other ones, Eric? Of ones that
As far as
that people called you about, or they were like, how the heck did you do that?
Like
I
some
know
of your most favorite-
I know the spaceships. He would get letters from viewers asking for specifications and stuff on it, and then It's like it's a model.
Yeah, sure.
We were
Oh,
just
that's
having
great.
fun because Star Wars had just come out, and it was like, hey, this would be great. Let's try this.
Right. Oh, that's
I
great.
was always bummed out that back in those days they never had an Emmy for special effects
Yeah.
or sets.
Well,
set
I mean,
design.
when Disney brought Tron out, it couldn't even be nominated for an Oscar because they said using computers was cheating. They called it cheating, and now you look at special effects categories, and it's all computers.
Yep.
Real quick, I do want to throw in, if you're someone responsible for getting fish for a corporate office, make sure you do your research. I had a temp job for a dentist once, and they gave me some cash to go to the pet store and get some fish. And I got some fish, and they ate each other.
Oh, really?
So just
that'd be cool to have
just
on
as a side, make sure they don't eat each other and that they're not predators of each other.
Well, that would have been a really interesting episode.
Yeah.
It's Fritz is
They would've
there.
Dude, if you would have done piranha,
Yeah, that'd been interesting.
Eric would have figured out a way to have the fish eat me.
Right.
or Jaws for Vidas.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Well, actually, there were ones with you. The Jaws one where you had him in the mouth, and
Oh, I have not seen that clip. I don't know if we
That
have.
was on-
It might be on your drive.
that's on the stuff I just gave you.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. So before we go, Eric is restoring. He restored some footage for us from the original show, which you all will eventually see. One thing I just looked at on that drive that I'm so excited for everybody to see is actual Nite Owl bloopers and blown takes from the original show.
Yeah.
I did not know this existed.
Yeah,
and
it was
boy,
basically I kept noticing that there were all these really funny outtakes that were going on. So every night when we were recording, I just grab a tape, throw it in, punch up the controller, and put it in record, mash it. And if something really good happened, I would go back and dub it off.
oh man,
So-
I can't wait to watch them all. I watched a few before we.
There's some of them are just hysterical.
Oh, real quickly, Eric, tell them how you got all of the Dave Wagstaff original artwork.
Oh yes,
that
so
was
so
used
real
on
quick,
them.
guys, when you come to our shows all this year, you'll see different art pieces from Dave Wagstaff from the original show. This is all thanks to Eric. What is the story behind that?
The story behind it was that after Dave Wagstaff passed away, he was having an estate sale, and he had stacks of all of the, because when he left, he just took everything with him. So he had these huge stacks of all of the original artwork that he had. Some of it was classic, others were unfinished. And somebody tipped off one of our promotions department people that this was happening. And so they ran over there and they bought everything that they could find. So I have other pieces as well that I keep at the station. And it sat for years. Originally they were going to bring back Nite Owl Theatre, and so they thought, hey, this is something good to, that we can use. Something didn't happen. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it didn't happen. Then the artwork just sat in a closet for years, and I discovered it, and I said, why is this just? So I rescued it, put it in archival bags, archival boxes to try to save it, and actually. I have them now all down in my basement, and my hope is I have been giving them out to people to keep as treasures. And,
Well, I have two in my living room
Yeah.
right now.
and I hope that one day maybe what's left of them I may just see if the Ohio Historical Society will take them as a donation and keep them preserved for perpetuity.
Well, just make sure that they go somewhere.
Yeah.
See,
Where
what-
that they
actually
don't
what
go to the
happened was
dumpster.
Dave would do the original art on an 11 by 14 art card.
Yeah.
And he would do them in full color, and then they would photograph them, transfer it to a 35 millimeter slide, and so it was a 35 millimeter slide version, not the original painting.
Yeah.
That would show up on the show. But he was spectacular. I mean, it was like if we had a Western movie, he had a Western Nite Owl cartoon. It was a love story, he had the Nite Owl in a very wonderful position. It was just, again, at 10, in those days when I was doing Channel 10, I mean, everybody was just, it was fun for everybody. It was almost like not being a job.
Yeah.
You know, they're paying me to do this.
Right.
If you do what you love, it never feels like work. And so that's,
Yeah.
I know it's been great now. Just I was talking to Vidas the other day. The new version started in 2010. It's now 2024. That's 14 years. The original run was 17 years. It's kind of weird. I'm like, how did we make it this far? And that went by so fast. So I can't imagine how fast the era went originally for you guys. Just 17 years of, but did it just like fly by, or did it feel like forever?
Oh, for me,
Yeah.
it flew by. Where I am today, like I have forgotten a lot of the things that you guys have reminded me of that I'd forgotten that we had done. But the number of years since 1934 have just shot by.
Yeah.
And I can't believe all of that things that I did. It is amazing. So if you're listening, pay attention to what you're doing right now, because it does go past fantastically fast. Actually, it's like one of the things with kids. I mean, it's like some of my great-grandchildren, I still see them as toddlers and beyond, and yet they're in 3rd and 4th grade now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So enjoy it while you're there.
Yeah.
And all of you out there listening, celebrate 50 years of Nite Owl Theater with us all this year. You'll see 40 different screenings in Columbus alone of our episodes, and there'll be sets of episodes out. There'll be artwork and all these things. And this is thank you for your support and celebrating Fritz and the show, because 50th only happens once in all of our lives. I'll tell you that much. But
What theaters will you be at?
We are at currently. We're going in order each month. So Grandview Theater's first. That's where we started the reboot. Studio 35, which was our second venue. Then the Gateway Film Center, which was our third. And London State Theater out in London, Ohio, which was our fourth. And so for the 50th, all 4 theaters have agreed to show different episodes. And so if you go to all of them, you'll see all of our episodes. Different artwork will be available at each show. And it's just going to be a big party and a way to relive nostalgia, but also see what we're doing currently and just celebrate the 50th. So
yeah, well, we also after Gateway, we went back to Studio 35, and then somewhere in there we started the Ohio Theater, and I forget what.
Well, the Ohio Theater, that's another thing. So that's when that's ready to be announced, we'll say something about it. But basically, the Ohio Theater, we do that every year for the summer movie series, and so they're a part of the 50th as well.
No, I'm embarrassed to ask this, but what year did we start at the Ohio Theater?
I don't remember. I mean, I think we did
Shining?
Fright Night,
Yep.
Shining,
Jaws?
Lost Boys. Did we do Lost Boys there last year? Yeah, Lost Boys, Halloween,
Jaws.
and then we did you hosted 2 or 3 years of not episodes but just movies, and then I think one more. Maybe we've done it 9 years, so this might be year 10, which is kind of awesome considering it's the 50th.
That's right. The first 2 years, the Ohio Theater had 2 horror films billed,
Right.
but all I did was come on and introduce them.
Yep.
But they were the studio released versions of the film. I didn't appear on screen in the films like the Nite Owl versions,
Right.
for like Jaws or Shining or what have you.
Right. So this will be the year. This is for everybody that always said, "Oh, I wish I could have seen those." This is it. This is the final time they're screening on the big screen. So please come out to a show and go to wntlchannelz.square.site is our website. All the shows are there. Facebook.com/Fritz The Nite Owl. You'll see the schedule. And Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very
on
much.
this
My pleasure.
episode.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for what you did when the show was on.
Always a pleasure.
Couldn't have done it without you.
And keep on listening.